Hello everybody, this is Maniac for Bricks, and I'm here today with a Collect-A-Thon video. These are the Bionicle stars, released in 2010 at somewhere between 10 to 20 pieces each. It does vary per figure. These were ages 6 to 16 and are released for about $8 in the United States as of the time of 2010. I do not have any of the canisters to show you with them, but this was the last toy wave of Bionicle figures released in 2010 for the original Generation 1. Now, what's interesting about this wave is that it almost never happened. This was something that LEGO employees, a small group of them, lobbied for in order to get one last, send-off for Bionicle. Now, I've already mentioned before that Motonui was a send-off, and I may have made a error in that video. Is technically in 2009 when the big Toa Motonui set came out. These were 2010, so later than that particular figure. And these were a little bit more bite-sized, they reused a couple pieces from previous years, and also added a few new things or different colors. So there are some things to appreciate with these figures because not only is the entire wave something we almost never got, but also, it has a couple more things to offer as far as pieces for those who want to do custom builds. For example, this figure on the right has this interesting spine piece, which is actually a rubbery kind of flexible plastic that stretches over a couple limbs in order to connect to the head and still allow for posing. So this is actually pretty cool, and it also makes it easy to take apart and put back on as desired. There's also two other interesting things about these figures. Even though it's a stars wave, it's supposed to be a highlight of different figures throughout Bionicle's run, there's actually two of them that were released in 2009. That's Gresh and Skrall. And there were two of them that were almost never released as official sets. I mean, they've been mentioned in story a few times before, usually through comics or actual visual novels and things, but they never had a set release up to this point. And that's Piraka as a set name, but actual name of the figure itself is Nektaan. And this Rahkshi, which we've had Rahkshi before, but none in yellow. They've been mentioned a couple times in comics, I remembered, as early as 2003, maybe 4. And this is a special type of Rahkshi that has heat vision. So I don't really know if there's a staff ability for it, but at least it has that going, and that's pretty darn cool. As far as the rest of the figures' names, this is Tahu, a classic, iconic figure from Bionicle, and Takanuva, another fan favorite. So, is there actually a story with these? Do these actually take place with the Generation 1 story? Well, kind of. I'm not entirely sure of the entire story, I'll just brief the details that I remember, but I'm not really sure off the top of my head if these are how they existed in the story. There have been artwork made that show each of these figures in this style, but I don't really know if that's supposed to be how they're transformed per se. Especially for a whole bunch of these, if not all of these, it's a lot of a downgrade. I mean, for toy, obviously it's a downgrade because they have less pieces, less articulation, and very few features. But I'd also say a downgrade for a bunch of them because they are shorter, they are, in some ways, clashing with each other as far as how pieces work, and personally, it's not really one of my favorite waves of Bionicle, but it's a nice one that I was able to pick up at one point, and still get the chance to talk about for this review, or for this Collect-A-Thon, for this both. So as far as story goes, this is the end of the story where Motonui has his giant robot to fight Makuta in another giant robot. Tahu is tasked with finding all these different golden armor pieces, which are supposed to be some sort of big massive weapon to at least hold off for all these waves of figures. These were shown up in stop motion animations by LEGO as multiples, not particularly just one of this or one of that. These were in multiples, and these were only singles because they're actual characters. But aside from that, once they find all the golden armor pieces, Tahu puts them together. He's able to help Madanui fight off Makuta, essentially. I don't remember the exact context, but it's pretty much like that. So, we'll talk about the golden armor in just a bit after we talk about each of the figures. I'm not going to compare each of these figures to their original forms or their close resemblance forms. You can check out more about that at a separate time. Or if you want to see a separate video, I can do that on the Extras channel. Let me know in the comments below. But I'd have to say, in general, they look relatively like the last forms of them that we've seen. However, a couple modifications just because of the pieces that are being used, and in some ways, like I said, a downgrade of features. For example, Takanuva actually only had one staff in the 2003 version that I'm thinking that he's supposed to represent. Color-wise, he didn't have dark bluish gray as a secondary part of his color scheme. And his mask was also gold. Like a metallic or flat dark gold, I think is the official term on Bricklink. So this is actually very different from it if you consider those factors. However, the last time we saw him in a set form was in 2008, and in that one he had more of a dark bluish gray and gunmetal gray as part of his color scheme, and a little bit more silver, so it kind of makes sense for this version to have something like that as well. He didn't have two staves either, but it's still okay as far as upping the part count for this figure, and it gives him a little bit more to work with. Honestly, the only figure that has any one, there are actually two figures that only have one hand open, and that's these two, and I think it's okay as is. So, let's see, we'll just go back over to Tahu here. Now, as far as his version, I think he's probably one of my favorites, because not only do I really like this figure, he was the first Bionicle figure that I got, at least in the 2001 form of him. This was the first figure that I got. But also, if you look at these two, these are really close in resemblance. It's only a little bit shorter than the original form. It's a lot different than the last one we saw in 2008, but I'm totally fine with going with this angle, because that's the one people are going to recognize the most. He does still have a fire sword, which is actually a lot more detailed, and a little bit of mesh of color in here, which is pretty nice. He has some sort of shield, I believe that is a shield, attached there, which is alright. And look at the color scheme. It's pretty even. You have, the right orange in the right places. The orange just fills in a little bit more in this center section, whereas it doesn't really do it on here. But I still think it's okay as a choice for just simplifying what pieces are used. I would have liked if there was a little bit more black in the color scheme, because it is a part of the Toamata, the 2001 figures, and for Tahu, it kind of sticks out. So, if I were to say anything about that, I would change that up. I would also say the silver doesn't really add to the color scheme here. It's okay, but I do know that this piece exists in red, usually with the sports hockey figures that were released. I don't remember exactly what year, but that does exist, and you could easily replace that if you wanted to get more consistent with the color scheme. For Gresh, he only came out the year before, so there's actually not much of difference between him and the previous one except for size, and a little bit more of the color scheme. This one has a lot more of dark green as just outfitting the whole thing, and then the lime green just kind of stacks on top. So I would have liked it if it was a little bit more mesh the way that it was with Tahu, because the original set for Gresh also had more of that mesh as well. Mesh of Gresh. But there are a couple of recolors of pieces, like these sword blades and his helmet. I don't know if they would say helmet or mask, but either way, still nice to get recolors of those. I do prefer the other version of Gresh's mask here, though. I did like the blend between dark green and lime green, and these still look pretty nice in silver. I'm not going to dispute that. I do like how these are new pieces for Gresh, only used, I believe, in this set. So, there's that. I've already talked about Takanuva. For Skrall, he's probably the least favorite out of all of these, in my opinion. First of all, he has a color scheme of black and lime green. However, the lime green is very, very limited compared to the black. the black is covering just about everywhere. I would have liked it if there was some lime green that was maybe put into here, but also know there are a lot of joint problems when it came to lime green production. I don't think it was fixed around that point, so I could understand why they just went with black here. But maybe, I don't know, in some other areas, maybe some accents to put on top of things or something. It would have been nice to add more lime green to mix with this color scheme. Skrall, originally in 2009, didn't really have lime green in their color scheme, so it's actually a pretty interesting twist for this. They originally had red, and I think this is actually okay for a choice because it at least separates it out a little bit more. The leader of the Skrall, Tuma, had lime green in his color scheme, so I understand if it's supposed to be a little bit more tie-in with that. I do like the lime green for the hands, and I do like, these as a recolor. This, I think, is a recolor for originally Kopaka's sword, and it's still a nice looking piece. The only problem with this figure, and I would say is the majority of the problem with this figure, is how to pose with it. You see, not only do these figures have very little articulation, they don't bend at the knees, they don't bend at the elbows, they're just stuck with these L shapes. But what's more frustrating is that if you try to move the arms for this one around, or even the head, you'll have them clashing with each other. For example, all three of these pieces are going to interfere with each other in some way or another. I don't think it's going to be too big of a problem with the sword, but it's still likely to happen there as well. Especially when you don't have a large range of motion to work around. I mean, you still have a range of motion, but forward and back, you're still going to have some issues here. And for these arms, if you try to move them around, it's going to clash like that. Which I find surprising in the animations is that it doesn't appear to be a problem. But I'm sure that when they were designing the animations, they did have to work around that. Now, for Nektaan, I'm just going to call him Nektaan, because that's his character name. For Nektaan, like I said, he's never been released before as a figure, so I have nothing to compare him to. The closest comparison would be Vizok, which is a dark blue Piraka from 2006. And in that version, it does look a lot the same if you compare the two, even down to the blade piece having some similarity. I do like this blade. That's actually a really nice piece there. I don't remember if it's the first appearance of it or if it's some, reissue of it, but I do like how they've actually put it together a spine piece. This is actually pretty intricate, a spine piece that works with these kinds of figures. So, very simple to put together. You still get some articulation in the head, albeit a little bit disjointed, a little bit, kind of held back with that spine. You can still move the arms around quite a bit, though, for what the arms are capable of. So, I'm okay with that. And there isn't really there is a mouth, but since it's all one dark blue piece, you can't really see it too well unless you look at it real close. But I'm looking at it real close. I do see some form of teeth in there. But like I said, it's not a different color compared to the rest of it. Last but not least, we have the Rahkshi. Now, compared to previous Rahkshi in 2003, this is a lot like them. It has the same use of colors, from the feet and the hands and the spine and the head. That's consistent. The dark bluish gray is a good substitute for the old dark gray that was used with them. The staff seems appropriate in terms of size and length. Well, I guess it would be the same thing. And the pose just fits well with it. This is a case where I would say the L-shaped arms work fine. However, for posing, it doesn't really work entirely that well. I would say just if you're standing it alone like this on a shelf, that's perfectly fine. But if you actually want to move this figure around, I, again, wonder how the animations were done with such little articulation here. Because you'll have a few issues with it hitting the head, or you have to move it around the head like so, in order to get more, life out of it. And, again, with these being L-shaped joints, especially with a hunched over head like the Skrall, it's a little difficult to move this about. You can't really get the poses that you could with the original Rahkshi, where you have one end that's stuck in the ground and it tilts the rest of its body upward. That is a little harder to do with this type of figure. As you can see here, you can even have a little bit of the foot sticking off the ground. It kind of works, but it just doesn't look comfortable. I do appreciate the mold for this piece, though, because it actually covers up the ball joint that's sitting here in the back of what would be its head or neck area. That's actually not covered up with the Skrall, but it is a nice way that they put this piece together. Some people have wanted to use just this spine piece on its own or just the head piece on its own, and they usually snip off this bit in the middle. I think that's an okay decision because it gives a little bit more head articulation. And it's not a too, these aren't really that valuable where if you modify them, it's going to matter too bigly. Now, as I keep talking here, I'm just going to take off some parts for Tahu, and we will put together the golden version of him. I think it's actually a cool looking version when it's done. It's actually pretty simple to put together. You see all the parts that I took off. Replace the shoulders and the chest armor. Not really anything changed on the legs, but I think that works fine. This actually instead goes under here, so it creates a space here for this shield. And really the shields can go just about any way possible. I don't think there's a specific pattern for it. But here we have the golden version of Tahu. And this does make it a collectible kind of series because you have to find each piece from each set in order to put together for Tahu. And obviously you have to get Tahu as a set by itself anyways, so you have something to attach it to. There are combo models for this series. They don't really look that great in my opinion, but if you would like to see more about that, let me know in the comments down below as soon as you can. And, it looks alright. So, thanks for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts about these figures as well in the comments below, whether or not you're a Bionicle fan already. Just curious as to what other people think about how these look and how they play. Like I said, there's not a lot to them where you could use the parts, in a lot of different ways. And, these are kind of just following from a previous smaller set base. So, I think it's still good that we got the figures because this was something that LEGO employees, like individual employees, asked for, not just the company at large. So, it's kind of a blessing that we even got these. It does have some interesting parts, and I do like that they at least tried to revive some of the older figures, but they still have a lot of gaps in between years as far as representation goes. We have 2 of them that are from the year before these came out. We have 2 of them that are from 2003. We have 1 of them that's never existed before, but reminisces 2006, and then 1 that reminisces specifically 2001, even though the characters appeared multiple times since then. There are still a whole bunch of years in between that I would have liked to see maybe 1 or 2 other figures, or if they were able to push for it, it would be nice to get maybe another wave of Bionicle stars in the same year, 2010, so that you could have more representation of, Metro Nui, or Voya Nui, or Mary Nui. These different locations that were actually pretty interesting as far as sets go for some parts, and depending on the Collect-A-Thons, we may talk about them later on. I know next week we'll definitely talk about the Hot Wheels Collect-A-Thon. I've asked about this on Instagram a little while ago, and I want to do a giveaway with a whole bunch of Hot Wheels Batmobiles sealed in packages for you guys. And I'm going to do a Collect-A-Thon where I show off my personal collection of Hot Wheels Batmobiles in anticipation of the new LEGO Batman movie coming in February 2017. So, I want to do a giveaway that'll start next week. It will have more details in that video. Stay tuned for that. You can subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with my videos, and hit the bell so that you'll be notified when the videos actually pop up. Hashtag notification squad. There will be a later Collect-A-Thon that will talk about the wave before this, the Glatorians, which features Gresh and Skrall. So if you want to see the original versions of those, again, stay around, stay subscribed, all that stuff. There will be a video based on those. I know this was a long one for today, but I wanted to get in as much detail as possible, and I did want to talk about this, form of him, to at least show what they were trying to go for, and, how things didn't always work out as far as these figures, especially just for their size. So, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time with more videos.